We've seen aliens invade Earth in every way imaginable, lumbering tripods, sleek death rays, and plans so convoluted they make a Bond villain blush. But what if they actually had a good plan? We recently did an episode looking at the worst alien invasions, where advanced species somehow forgot the basis of conquest, logic, or even common sense. But today, we're doing the reverse. What if the aliens showed up and this time, their invasion actually made sense? These are the 10 best alien invasion plans, where we're exploring examples from science fiction and speculative strategy that actually work, those that follow the first rule of warfare we've often cited over the years. After all, a truly dangerous alien doesn't just arrive with a big gun, they arrive with a plan that's already winning before the first shot is fired. Now, since these will mostly be fictional references, we'll be having a lot of spoilers, and more to the point, we will often see the aliens end up eventually losing from something either unpredictable or really stupid. That just comes from wanting a book or film that is meant for human audiences who generally prefer happy endings, not humanity's long-term enslavement or extinction. So even when the aliens later do something outrageously stupid to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, we will still give credit where it is due. Number 10. The Infiltration Gambit. Invasion without a war. Why conquer Earth with plasma bombs when you can do it with paperwork, puppets, or parasites? The most effective invasion isn't the one that arrives in orbit, it's the one that never has to. You let the target fall from within. In science fiction, this approach is everywhere. Perhaps best known from John Campbell's Who Goes There, which later inspired the awesome movie The Thing, and Robert Heinlein's The Puppet Masters, where slug-like parasites take over your brains, which we see in many newer works like The Serpentine Goa'uld of Stargate, and Colony, where humans themselves enforce the occupation. The beauty of infiltration is deniability, no need for orbital bombardments or expensive fleets, just blend in, take key positions, and you use humanity's own systems of trust and cooperation as weapons. And it works especially well if your infiltration doesn't need to stay secret forever, just long enough to make resistance futile. It is often cheaper, too. A point we often make about alien invasions is that the spaceships themselves, simply by their sheer kinetic energy, contain enough destructive power to win a war just by slamming as garbage in the planet for decelerating. Yet that energy still has to come from somewhere, and in particular, it had to come from the economy of an advanced civilization with lots of other science and technology. If that same civilization could put a bunch of brain slugs or brainwashing satellites to a planet for less energy and effort than ramming it with relativistic kill missiles, or dropping murder bots and stormtroopers on the planet, all the better, especially as it minimized the damage to your new planet. Infiltration plays well with post-contact psychology. Even in failure, it's useful. Once people learn aliens are among them, or might be, trust fractures, every neighbor could be compromised, every leader might be controlled, paranoia becomes a weapon. That's why the first rule of warfare is, never hand someone a loaded gun unless you're sure who they're pointed at, and infiltration ensures they might be pointing it at each other. No matter how well trained and equipped your troops are, no matter how good your battlefield strategy is, if your enemy knows your moves in advance, and has saboteurs in your midst, it will go badly. Of course, history has shown that an empire that relies heavily on dirty tricks and spy masters to get its conquering and ruling done often has leaders who have to worry about those same shenanigans being aimed their way. Paranoid or treacherous leaders often have problems stemming from those, and are rarely loved, which is also an effective approach. Number 9. False Prophets. The Alien Messiah Strategy. Who needs invasion fleets when you can be welcomed as saviors? Sometimes the best way to take Earth is to show up not as conquerors, but as liberators, philosophers, or gods. From Childhood's End to V and Earth Final Conflict, we often see aliens arrive with gifts and goodwill, only to reveal more sinister motives. In Final Conflict, the alien Talons give humanity technology, end hunger and war, and even cure diseases, but also quietly encourage religions devoted to themselves, implant brain control chips, and recruit humans for a mysterious war, which turns out to be a civil war among themselves. In Childhood's End, Clark's aliens arrive peacefully, but park their ships over every major city and declare themselves in charge. They usher in a golden age, but hide their appearance for decades, because they look exactly like demons from ancient mythology. Eventually, they breed a new generation of hybrid human children with psychic powers and wipe out old humanity and Earth itself. This strategy works because it doesn't feel like conquest. The aliens are not demanding you kneel, they are offering cures, free energy, utopia. In exchange, loyalty, obedience, voluntary cultural realignment, maybe even genetic hybridization. It's not so much that they conquer us, that we slowly, willingly surrender. And the irony, these are often the scariest invaders because they don't just take over, they rewrite what it means to be human, not through bombs but through belief. Utopia makes a wonderful leash, and conquest is expensive, while compliance might be on sale. Check if the enemy is for sale or likes shiny new toys before spending money on a war. That is the first rule of warfare. Sometimes it's cheaper to buy a ward than to burn one. Number 8. Weaponized belief. Memes, myths, and messiahs. This strategy demands patience and precision. Propaganda, infiltration, and soft power only work if you don't push too hard too fast. You can't let people realize it's an invasion until they're already cheering you on. But you have to travel decades or centuries to your next conquest, or it's a couple of generations of mimetic groundwork. And it's not always evil. Take the Vulcans in Star Trek, who after the film First Contact, quietly guide Earth's development for a century before helping form the Federation. They don't force Earth into a unified government, they just wait, gently nudging, occasionally lecturing, mostly watching. Soft power at warp speed. We all like Spock, but it's a lot more sinister when not seen that way. Some civilization, like ours, just pulling itself out of the ashes, gets confronted with a long-lived and peaceful race that encourages them to abandon all emotion and embrace logic and reason. It's entirely voluntary, but there's soft coercion in exchange for technology and help. Then there's the flip side, cultural and religious engineering as a long-term tool of domination. In the final Dune novel by Frank Herbert, the Bene Gesserit, mistresses of myth, prophecy, and political manipulation, ultimately win not by force, but by converting the leadership of a vastly more numerous invading enemy. Their victory stems from a 15,000-year policy of inventing messiahs, like Paul Atreides, seeding beliefs, and making themselves too useful to eliminate. We often see this play out in fiction as a twist. The aliens, or humans, weren't fighting battles, they were writing scripture, training their enemies' grandchildren to be their allies. It's a strategy where defeat is never noticed, because it looks like free will. First rule of warfare: pick your battles wisely. Be smart enough not to start stupid fights, or even let the enemy know they were in one, or still are. Number 7. A hybrid convert strategy. In some stories, the aliens don't want to wipe us out, they want to transform us. Enter the genetic or mimetic or psychic invasion, an attack not of ships and soldiers, but of ideas. We see this in Threshold and The Signal. Instead of laser battles, imagine subliminal broadcast or genetic modification to slowly rewrite human form or behavior. This might be a very economical and plausible invasion strategy in a galaxy with no FTL travel, where you send a simple pod to land on a planet, identify its dominant species, and begin a conversion and hybridization process. The Tyranids from Warhammer 40,000 use this strategy most for subversion to make a planet easier to conquer by normal methods, and in Threshold, a bit of a hidden gem of a single-season sci-fi TV shows, with Brent Spiner and Peter Dinklage in it, we see an alien tesseract that basically appeared, rewrote some DNA and brains, and used those folks to spread itself like a plague. Keeps their motives pretty mysterious too, and saves on special effects budgets. Number 6. Shock and Awe, the Killing Star approach. Let's say subtlety isn't your style. You don't want to whisper ideas or pose as a god. You want Earth gone, or conquered so completely it doesn't twitch. Then you do what the Killing Star does, strike without warning, with relativistic kill vehicles moving at near light speed. There's no declaration, no hovering warships, no ominous music cue. Just a flash in the sky, and everyone important is vaporized. This isn't just plausible, it's likely. Any civilization with the power to reach us probably has weapons we cannot defend against. Kinetic rods from orbit, quantum bombs, nanite plagues, AI worms in our infrastructure. They wouldn't land, they'd strike, and only follow up when resistance is mathematically impossible. A spaceship able to cross the void of space at just half of light speed would carry kinetic energy of approximately 1.125 times 10 to the 24 joules. equivalent to about 269 million megatons of TNT, making a single impact a planet-killing event thousands times greater than all the nuclear weapons humanity ever built. All they had to do is dump various garbage out their airlocks over a 12 to 24-hour period before decelerating and watching as those land in a destructive wave across Earth, peeling civilization away as the planet turns into a destructive wave. And that's just one aircraft carrier-sized ship, not very big or likely containing any troops. A real armada could glass Earth before even arriving in orbit. Of course, this isn't the greatest approach to conquest. This also opens the door to other weapons of mass destruction, such as deploying self-replicating murder bots or using gas, as happens in Battlefield Earth, both the book and the film. This is our first example of an invasion that initially works well, but is later undermined by terminally stupid invaders. Given that the Cyclos completely dominate Earth for 1,000 years in that story, I think it must be called a successful invasion. They teleport gas drones in, wipe out most of humanity, seize all the gold they can find, and then mine for more. In the film, they enslave humans for this purpose, but in the novel they mostly ignored the scattered survivors who retreat into radioactive mountainous regions, as the Cyclos are incredibly sensitive to radiation. 1,000 years later, the alien governor decides to use humans to mine for gold in those areas, which is foolish, but that misjudgment does not imply the initial invasion was flawed, any more than the decline of Rome implies Julius Caesar was bad at conquest, even if both he and later leaders made plenty of mistakes. This also highlights the first rule of warfare, more important than any other. The best offense is a sudden and overwhelming attack. We see a similar strategy used by the hive mind alien, Morning Light Mountain in Peter Hamilton's Commonwealth saga. After millennia of being trapped on its homeworld fighting its cousins, it catches some human explorers and gets wormhole technology from them. As soon as it has it, it opens up wormholes to all its rivals and dumps nukes through, then launches an invasion of human-controlled space. Given that this approach tends to ruin anything of value beyond raw materials, it isn't always the approach you want. This strategy works best if you believe humans are too dangerous to let live or too stubborn to subjugate, or if your goal isn't conquest at all, just elimination of a potential rival species before it grows claws. We'll look at a more extreme version of this later, but as a reminder that survival is not the Olympic Games. If you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck. That's the first and most important rule of warfare after all. The real nightmare isn't an alien you can fight, it's one you never even see coming. Number 5. Divide and Conquer, turning humanity into its own worst enemy. But let's say you do want to conquer Earth and maybe keep its civilization and resources intact. The best way to do that, let humans do most of the work. We are good at fighting each other, we have a lot of practice. National rivalries, ideological factions, class divisions, we're basically a buffet of potential collaborators. An invader doesn't need to crush Earth, it just needs to hand out a few favors, seed some chaos, and let us fracture into warlords, regimes, and cults. This is the core of Colony and V. Aliens empower one human faction like the Red Hats to keep the rest in line. It's also part of the strategy in Footfall, another great team-up novel by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, where Earth's governments can be manipulated or intimidated separately. You do not need to build a massive army, just arm a few collaborators, let them call the shots, and issue veiled threats about what happens if they disobey. It's the classic Imperial playbook. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, at least for today. That's the first rule of warfare when you weaponize internal division. Just make sure your temporary allies don't become permanent problems. Many empires fall from internal divisions, and if you built your empire on that strategy, it means you have a lot of folks in positions of power who have skill at enacting it and the ethics to think it's fine to try. As Baron Harkonnen tells us from Dune, never trust a traitor, even one you made yourself. Number 4. Trojan Tech, when the upgrade is the invasion. Not all invasions begin with guns, some begin with gifts. Imagine aliens arrive and offer us a miracle device, say a clean energy generator the size of a microwave that powers a city. No catch, no charge, just plug it in and enjoy utopia. Now imagine that same device secretly transmits data back to the aliens, or slowly rewires our brains, or even contains self-replicating tech that spreads like spores. Sometimes it's just seductive tech with traps built in. In Halo, Forerunner artifacts often manipulate minds. We see a lot of examples of this in science fiction, but it need not be an intentional trap. The change of attitude and perspective might be inherent to the technologies you are offering, or it could simply be that those new technologies and the gratitude and respect they generate toward those who gave them lets them position themselves to do a lot of converting, seen as wise and benevolent. It's brilliant because it bypasses resistance. No one wants to shoot the box that just cured cancer. The aliens don't need to enslave us, they just offer us a better deal than our current reality. And if we start using their tools, we become the infrastructure of their empire. We manufacture their parts, house their networks, run their code. On the flip side, as we mentioned earlier, once you occupy a culture, benevolent or more traditionally imperialistic, your secrets tend to drip out. They get to know your weaknesses and learn your technology. This violates the first rule of warfare. Keep your secrets secret. If you let your enemy use your technology, don't be surprised they figure it out and turn it against you. Number 3. Overwhelming force and organization. Invasion sci-fi tends to ignore that not only would aliens tend to have more numbers and better technology than us, but they probably have superior strategy, doctrine, and discipline, not just in the military, but in their organization at every level. This is likely to make them even harder to beat than an alien who simply had a giant mothership, especially one lacking antivirus software. In Walter John Williams' Dread Empire's Fall series, the Shah are a species of hyper-legalistic conquerors who rule the galaxy through a rigid system of unbending law called the Praxis. They don't just invade worlds, they colonize minds. They have absolutely overwhelming force, and their conquest of Earth is an easy and distant footnote at the start of the series, which begins with the last Shah's death and the subsequent breakup of the Empire. When they conquered the galaxy, every race they subjugated had to adopt their worldview, their philosophy, even their rituals. This system runs so deep that by the time of the books, the Shah have all committed ritual suicide, believing that no new laws need to be made, that the last one of them still alive serves no further purpose, and the surviving vassal species continue enforcing their doctrine to the letter, out of sheer inertia, for a while anyway. The Shah didn't conquer for wealth or personal power, they conquered to institute a perfect system and eliminate change. Every new species was a potential source of ideological chaos, so they used their power to mandate absolute conformity across light years of space. The result? Peace, but the price of stagnation, decay, and cultural death. And this may be desirable. If your goal is an empire that is astronomical in both space and time, able to endure for millions of years, then it probably needs to be either very unchanging or undergo cycles so recurring that they amount to a wheel of time with no axle wobbling. Beings able to live for thousands or even millions of years to ensure continuity of such civilizations may tend to feel they and their civilization have no new ideas to benefit from, and even if one exists, the damage the disruption will cause is not worth it. Or they slide it in over 10,000 years of slow crawl maybe. We tend to assume such an empire would lose in the end because of their stagnation, but they are a perfected empire effectively, and we have our own skewed view of living in an era of constant technological disruption. As we discussed elsewhere, there probably is a real limit on new science and technology where you either figure it all out or progress slows to a creep. In a case like that, gambling on clever new techs or tricks is likely to lose against a numerically superior and more disciplined enemy. This strategy isn't just a sci-fi conceit either. As we discussed in our episode on Interdiction, any civilization spreading at relativistic speeds might come to the same conclusion. If light speed lag makes communication and coordination hard, every new colony becomes a potential rival. Mutation, innovation, rebellion. These are not distant threats, they are inevitable. Unless. Number 2. Preemptive invasion and interdiction for conformity. The Galactic Empire problem. Enter the IBC, Interdiction Bubble Civilizations. In our Fermi Paradox episode on the idea, we explored the possibility that advanced civilizations may enforce strict cultural stasis, not to be cruel but to maintain coherence across vast galactic distances. If you're sending ships out at 90% of light speed to build new colonies, you can't govern them in real time. You can't even hope to visit them again in your lifetime. But what if those colonies start to drift? What if a few centuries later their descendants start building fleets of their own? Every colony left unchecked becomes the seed of a future rival empire, one that might attack you, potentially discouraging colonization or colonization beyond a certain point or distance. So perhaps you stop it before it starts. You invade not just to take territory but to freeze it, culturally, technologically, even biologically. You outlaw divergence, you make mutation a capital crime. Your invasion doesn't end with conquest, it begins with assimilation, or by invading over and over again and strip mining border systems to leave them forever too weak to pose a real threat to the Empire, or to serve as a bridgehead for some more distant empire, aliens or cousins who fled into the galactic depths and are now coming home. The ultimate scorched earth policy. This approach doesn't win the war quickly, but prevents future wars from happening. You're not just pacifying the galaxy, you're sterilizing it, one thought at a time. The Shah showed us what that looks like, a galaxy where nothing changes, because nothing is allowed to. And number 1, beyond Scorched Earth. We talked about using debris from decelerating fleets or relativistic kill missiles to perform a massive first strike, but there's a lot to be said about hitting a planet so hard in your initial attack that nobody, not even the lava men in the mantle, are going to survive. You wreck a world and if necessary even its colonies so thoroughly that not even a record of them exists afterwards. This approach is perhaps best exemplified by the Vogons from Douglas Adams' masterpiece The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They arrive, inform everyone the planet is to be demolished for a hyperspace bypass, and within minutes they are ready to depart. Job complete. Like much of Adams' work, it's satire with a sharp edge of truth. And for those who didn't know, the bypass wasn't even the real reason. The Vogons had been bribed by a consortium of galactic psychiatrists to destroy Earth, as it was actually a giant computer built to determine the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. The answer was 42, which would ruin the entire galactic counseling industry if people stopped having existential crises. This is our number 1 tactic today, not just because it's brutally effective, but because it reminds us that an advanced civilization does not need to enslave others. They can use robots. The resources of a single planet are trivial. Only the life forms, art, and culture on it have any significant intrinsic value, and that's obviously very much in the eye of the beholder. And if you really wanted those, you could probably collect most of them covertly in advance, grab the DNA, the data archives, and then blow up the planet anyway. It also gives us the first rule of warfare. There is no such thing as overkill, and if brute force isn't working, you're just not using enough of it. And on that note, thanks for joining us for another episode of Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. Like the video if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe and notification buttons for future episode alerts. You can also help support the show on Patreon. And until next time, have a great week.